Calling the meeting to order. This is meeting number 35 of the Standing Committee on International Trade. See, we have a couple of new members sitting at the table, so welcome to all of you. This is the best committee on the Hill, and that's my own plug here, but we have a great group of people, regular members and substitute members, I'm sure. So I appreciate you all being here. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Thursday, February 12, 2026, the committee is commencing its study of Canada's trade with Japan. I have a study budget in the amount of $9,750. Can I adopt this before we start with our processes? Everybody's okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, that's done. We have with us today from the Canadian Cattle Association, Tyler Fulton by video conference, someone the committee knows very well. And from Vancouver Fraser Port Authority, Alexa Young, Vice President, Government, External and Environmental Affairs, also by video conference. So welcome to you both. We will start with Mr. Fulton for a presentation of up to 5 minutes, please.
Well, good afternoon, Madam Chair. Thanks for the opportunity to appear today. My name is Tyler Fulton, as you said, President of the Canadian Cattle Association. Through our provincial members, CCA represents about 60,000 beef producers across Canada, supporting jobs, the economy in rural communities, and food security. Today, I'll be sharing the success story of the Canadian beef industry with Japan and the lessons from this positive relationship. Japan is Canada's second largest beef export market after the United States. It is a high-value premium market that rewards consistent quality and long-term customer relationships. CCA leadership has had the privilege to travel to Japan to strengthen our partnerships and experience firsthand the success of Canadian beef. In 2025, Canada exported $378 million in beef and beef products to Japan. The value of beef exports into this market has increased by roughly 76% from 2018 to 2025, despite significant global volatility. Through CPTPP, Canada gained meaningful beef market access into Japan. When CPTPP took effect in 2018, tariffs on Canadian beef went from 38.5% to the current 27.5% on fresh beef. Tariffs continue to lower annually. Japan's beef tariff are scheduled to reach 9% by 2033. That predictable tariff schedule, essential for long-term investment and market is essential for long-term market development. CPTPP is the gold standard for free trade agreements. It sets ambitious commitments, science-based standards, and upholds rules-based trade. The Indo-Pacific region, including Japan, represents the largest opportunity for the long term. I believe the success of this trade relationship can provide 3 valuable lessons for Canada's trade diversification. First, we need to uphold rules-based trade. Any new CPTPP member must match the ambition and high standards of the agreement. Canadian beef farmers and ranchers were deeply disappointed when the UK's accession to CPTPP. The UK acceded CPTPP with remaining non-tariff barriers against Canadian beef, and we did not use the leverage we had to resolve it. Therefore, it's essential that any CPTPP expansion should strengthen, not dilute the ambition and standards of the agreement. Second, we must not lose sight of what meaningful market access is. For producers, that means not only tariff reductions, but the removal of non-tariff barriers so that trade can take place. Our success in Japan is not only due to tariff reductions, but also the removal of non-tariff barriers. Japan has been a reliable trade partner who abides by science-based and rules-based trade. This eliminates non-tariff barriers and other obstacles to trade. Finally, trade diversification pursued without regard to outcomes does not serve Canadians. Canada's current negotiations with Mercosur illustrate this concern. There's no viable opportunity for Canadian beef in Mercosur countries, and yet we are the number one bargaining chip on the negotiating table. Allowing increased access from countries with low standards displaces Canadian sustainably produced beef and undermines domestic production at a time when Canadian beef herd is rebuilding. Mercosur beef also has low standards in labor, animal health, and environment, putting at risk our industry's biosecurity and hurting our reputation as a beef exporter who has high standards in labor, environment, and production. For Canadian beef producers, that is not diversification. It's risk without reward. We need to ensure trade agreements provide long-term benefits that encourage further production in Canada to meet global demand. In closing, CCA supports trade diversification that is strategic, reciprocal, and meaningful. Japan is a great example of diversification done right. It is a reliable, high-value, and strategic market for Canadian beef. Thanks. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fulton. On to Ms. Young, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. Merci à la présidente et aux membres du comité.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. It's an honor for me to join you today on the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nation traditional territories. These are extraordinary times for Canada. Trade rules have been upended. Canadians are feeling anxious. I wish to thank you and all your fellow parliamentarians for your service and leadership in these consequential times.
Carney's commitment to double exports to non-U.S. markets in the next 10 years is the right commitment at the right time. And delivering on this commitment is going to require a Team Canada approach and purposeful action to make more stuff like metals and minerals, wood and energy products, agri-foods, machinery and equipment, to sell more stuff to customers who want and need what Canada makes, and to move that stuff to where it needs to go reliably. As a trade-enabling infrastructure folks, that's where the Port of Vancouver comes in. So where do we see the biggest opportunity for Canada in working to achieve this ambitious target? Making, selling, and moving Canadian goods to the Indo-Pacific region, where 50% of global GDP will reside by 2040. China, South Korea, Asian nations, and the market we're here to talk about today, Japan. The good news, the Port of Vancouver is uniquely poised to play an outsized role in seizing this opportunity broadly and in Japan specifically. So we're very pleased that you're undertaking this important study. As context, the Port of Vancouver is Canada's largest port, bigger than the next 5 biggest ports combined. We're North America's most diversified, handling about $350 billion of goods every year, whether it's retail products from Ontario, Manitoba canola, Saskatchewan potash, Alberta oil, or BC lumber, you name it, there's a good chance we moved it. And 80% of those products are already headed to non-US markets. That includes Japan, our second biggest trading partner by volume, and where key exports include metallurgical coal, wheat, canola, and forestry products, as well as other products, including energy exports. Looking back, what has enabled our exports to Japan and its neighbors? Decades of investment, about $9 billion over the past 15 years alone, has helped us move more and more of what Canadians make, mine, harvest, and grow with record trade year after year. And with game-changing projects on the horizon, which I'll get into shortly, not only will Canadians and their businesses benefit, customers in Japan and elsewhere will too. So as you undertake this study, 3 big opportunities from our perspective. 1, we need to invest in and build more trade-enabling infrastructure. First step, get game-changing projects that are ready to deliver for Canadians, like Roberts Bank Terminal 2 across the finish line, a project that will see the creation of new industrial land, a 3-berth terminal that's going to unleash an additional $100 billion in trade capacity a year. It's a project that already has its environmental assessment approvals in place and the consent of 27 First Nations. And it's a project that, with support from the government via the Major Projects Office, can move towards a final investment decision and early construction works. Game-changing. What more, as a country, we must also invest in getting more last-mile infrastructure up and running. Think road, bridges, overpasses, underpasses, and tunnels to ensure that as we look to double export capacity, we're staying on top of what this means for communities that have rail crossings, truck traffic, and other activities passing through. Over the past 15 years, the Canadian government has helped invest in 2 major waves of rail supporting infrastructure in this gateway. But to double export, much more is needed, and we're pleased to have recently submitted proposals to Transport Canada's new Trade Diversification Corridors Fund. Dans une perspective plus large, et si nous voulons bâtir
More
davantage...
broadly, as we look to get more trade-enabling infrastructure up and running efficiently, there is also opportunity to make systemic changes to our regulatory frameworks. For example, expanding port authorities' permitting powers. In Vancouver, for example, in recent years, we've permitted substantive projects such as the Centerm Expansion Project and G3's new grain terminal, each worth about $500 million. We've run a thorough environmental assessment process, including robust consultation with First Nations. Critically, we deliver timely decisions, over 90% within our targets, which is pivotal to attracting investment. So to make a long story short, empowering port authorities to do more for Canada on permitting. We have the experience, the skills, and the track record to get more done.
Existing projects to make them more efficient and reliable. Here, we must work together to keep adopting new digital tools and tech to help partners share data and connect greater supply chain visibility, all with the aim to move products faster, safer, and more sustainably. We can also do more to maximize trade capacity through projects like dredging under the Second Narrows Bridge in Burnaby, BC, that will see us slightly narrow the channel to let tankers leaving from
Ms. Young,
TMXs...
my apologies to interrupt, but the committee members are anxious to ask you questions, and I have to keep track of the time very carefully. So if you can just finish your remarks in answering while you're answering some of the questions from the members. That's all right?
Absolutely.
Okay, Ms. Cronus. Ms. Cronus, for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, et merci.
And thank you, Ms. Young, for your interesting remarks.
I had the pleasure of visiting the Port of Vancouver a few months ago, and from where we sit on Vancouver Island, the Port of Vancouver is an important part of a wider network of ports that are working, including the home ports that we have in Nanaimo, that are working to expand trade with reliable partners like Japan, which has been a stable and important partner for Canada as a Pacific nation. And of course, as you know, the Port of Nanaimo has just signed a sister port agreement with the Port of Kaohsiung in Taiwan, and our CEO, Ian Marr, has played a real leadership role in the Indo-Pacific through the Association of Asian Pacific Ports. So as you know, communities like mine are working to deepen ties with partners like Japan and others in the Indo-Pacific region that share our strong standards, domestic values, and the rule of law. So I'm wondering if you could actually comment on whether you're seeing stronger coordination among ports in countries like Japan, Taiwan, and South Korea that share those common governance and trade standards with Canada.
Absolutely, and wonderful to see you as well. And we're always happy to have folks join us at the Port of Vancouver. Absolutely, we're seeing both increased collaboration across ports in Canada. We all know we have a role to play, and we've seen an uptake for sure in what is best practices for ports internationally, with also trading of information across both Canadian ports and ports, including in the Indo-Pacific. A lot of that happens during things like trade and investment missions. We had one of our executives on the BC mission to Japan just last year. We were also pleased to host a delegation of Japanese parliamentarians at the port of last year, so they could bring back some of these findings in terms of what that means.
Conversations in your conversations with those Japanese representatives and representatives from other Pacific ports, I'm wondering if you've picked up any sort of intelligence or observations from them around how they feel about Canada's rapprochements with Canada and the tensions that that's creating in the Indo-Pacific.
I would say the biggest opportunity, the biggest thing that we're hearing in markets, including Japan, it's all about certainty. These are, customers who want what we need, who want and need what we make. and they appreciate this commitment to double exports. It still requires it to move reliably. So they're looking at things like labor stability, making sure, that, they can have all the trade enabling infrastructure that's needed, but if it's not being moved reliably, and we've seen over the years some significant disruptions that have really tarnished our reputation as being open for business. Those are the types of things, these sort of domestic issues that have an impact on certainty for customers. That's
great.
The biggest topic.
That's great to know. I'm wondering if, in that vein, you could talk about the potential and the opportunities that we have with short sea shipping to be able to address some of those issues.
Absolutely, it's part of the toolkit that's required. Looking at all kinds of solutions to get products to market creatively, and we know that there's some good progress being made on looking at some opportunities to collaborate, including with the Port of Nanaimo on just that.
And that's great. I know that our folks are very eager to work on that with you, and that they see tremendous opportunities to be able to enforce Canada's trade resilience and to be able to take advantage of those opportunities. As you know, we've grown some of our Vancouver Island exports with Japan through initiatives that include things like kiln drying lumber and other things. I'm wondering if you could just comment, given the increased uncertainty in global trade, on how important it is for the Western ports to work together to be able to present that sort of one network approach to be able to deepen relationships with reliable partners for Canada like Japan.
Absolutely, it's critical. Doubling exports is going to require an all hands on deck. There's going to be different opportunities for different ports on the West Coast of Canada, given where they are with existing investments and as they look into the future. And so really rallying around this target and the vision for Look West is going to require increased collaboration. And at the Port of Vancouver, we're excited to do just that.
In the short time I have left, I just want to turn to sort of the LNG side of things. And I'm wondering if you can comment on the increase in our LNG exports and whether or not we are missing some opportunities in that space compared to competitors like the United States.
A brief answer, please.
Sure. I won't speak to the broader export of LNG question, but I will say one great news story at the Port of Vancouver is the increased use of LNG bunkering, which is one step in shipping with lower air emissions. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lavoie, please, for 6 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Merci à...
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to our witnesses for being with us today. First of all, I have some questions for Ms. Young. Firstly, congratulations for your French. That was very pleasant. You're a very good French speaker, and that was great to hear. I'm an MP for the Quebec City region. Last Friday, Quebec became the 6th port to have a certification for receiving containers in Quebec. So this is a subject that's very interesting for me. You were talking about the port. It's very interesting to have you here today, and I will never be able to ask you all the questions I have with the time allotted. But let's talk about Japan. It's a great exporting nation for Canada. 13% of our exports go to Japan. So you're the first witness to whom I ask a question in this study. So I'd like to ask you, what is the capacity of the port? We're talking about 13%. Do you think it could double in the next years? Would it be possible to double the current exports that you're making to Japan? Do you think that would be possible? And do we have the capacity right now to do it? So is the will there? That's one thing. Is Japan willing to receive exports from Canada? And do we have the capacity? Thank you to the member. That's a very good question. And thank you for your words regarding the port of Montreal. The port of Quebec City, not in Montreal. It's the port in Quebec City. Yes, but the development of the Montreal port is also very positive. I'll answer in English.
We decades of investment have allowed us to grow capacity. Just to give you an example, over the past 15 years alone, we've increased capacity at the Port of Vancouver across a whole bunch of different commodities and to a whole bunch of different markets by 70%. So significant. But there's no doubt as we look to double exports, that's going to take a whole bunch more capacity and optimization, as I discussed previously. Number one, let's get Roberts Bank Terminal 2 up and running. That's going to increase capacity by $100 billion annually. It's also going to relieve some of the congestion that we're seeing in the Burrard Inlet. That's going to allow us to build capacity for other commodities. Again, Japan is looking, increasingly at more and more bulk commodities. That's sort of the number one interest that they have. So all of these are connected in terms of building capacity more broadly, optimizing it again with digital tools and tech, and things like the second Narrows dredging. Let's get the domestic stuff right to actually continue to grow capacity and meet this critical moment in time.
Alors, selon vous, vous seriez capable avec les investissements?
So in your opinion, with investments, you would have the capacity. Do you think Japan would be able to double exports from their side?
That's going to require, this is why the work that the government is doing in terms of the trade missions to Japan is going to be so critical to really understand, what the demand profile is on what commodity. So that working in tandem as we're identifying the opportunities for trade growth and partnership, so that they're able to, best figure out what's going to be needed to maximize the opportunity from an import perspective.
OK. Merci, Madame. Alors, ce que je comprends...
Thank you. So what I'm understanding is that we do have logistical capacity in the coming years with investments. So earlier, you were talking about permits at the terminal. How many requests do you have to permit terminals? How many are ongoing? How many applications are ongoing? For the permitting that we are responsible for, do you have any new applications ongoing, first of all? Yes, absolutely. How many? I don't know exactly the number, but...
J'aimerais savoir, et il touche quel...
Yes, I would like that to be provided to the committee, and also which sectors are involved. My other question is this. We're in the east of the country, and earlier I was saying that in Quebec City, we have a port that just received container certification. However, we're very far from what is being done at the other 5 major ports of Canada. And even if we are very optimistic, Quebec City Port will stay a small player. Regarding Eastern Canada, do you receive a lot of goods that will be traded through the Pacific, or do you really only receive goods from the west of Canada?
From Western provinces, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Alberta, BC, lots of Ontario as well, machinery and equipment. Still shipping some product east. There's a very significant demand in the Indo-Pacific for things like seafood coming out of Atlantic Canada. So of course that would be the route that makes most sense coming from the west, from the west coast. So yes, we are very much, and that's also a reflection of the history of dependence on the U.S. market in terms of, you see that, a lot of the trade enabling infrastructure has been built to be north-south, south-north instead of east-west. And so these are sort of some of the things that we're looking at in terms of, there's still tons of opportunity in the EU and elsewhere. But certainly with, 50% of GDP residing in the Indo-Pacific in the next 20 years, that's where the crux of the opportunity as we see it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Savard-Tremblay, for 6 minutes, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Merci à nos
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to our 2 witnesses. Thank you for your presentations that are extremely relevant. My first question is for Mr. Fulton. we're talking about Japan today. You also talked about the UK, which is a good example that we keep hearing about food safety barriers, non-tariff barriers, even on paper, if the products are able to be imported. We know that there can always be dangers around illnesses or not enough food safety where we might not share a point of view with a different country. So I think we all agree that we never want to risk Canadians' health or anyone's health in trading our products. So in the case of Japan, please tell me, we know that Japanese regulations are extremely strict, and that can make things complicated for our exports. But in your case, what is the biggest obstacle? Is it certification, for example? Is it traceability? Is it inspections, labeling, descriptions? If you could please give us more detail on the situation, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Japan is, some context here, Japan has been a developing market for more than 3 decades. We have worked through many of the SPS related issues early on, and so where the focus lies for the beef industry is largely in competing with other global providers of beef. And that's why the CPTPP has been so effective, in that we achieved, actually, for a short term, a benefit over our American counterparts in tariff rate advantage. But now I think is at parity with the Americans. So I would say broadly, we understand the Japanese market very well, and now have been able to really meet their threshold with our existing food safety systems that are in place. I can't stress enough that Canada's food safety systems are second to none in the world, and so that makes it easy for us to gain access to some of these countries.
Donc, ça va, de ce que je comprends, ça va.
So if I'm understanding, things are going rather well. Would you say that the government is supporting you? Are you being provided sufficient information to overcome some of these obstacles? Are trade agents or trade delegates at your disposal enough? Do you have the tools that you need?
Yes, the addition of the Indo-Pacific office really helped build capacity to address issues in other markets, Indonesia and the Philippines, for example. Japan, it being such a mature market for us, I think our focus has been on improving our marketing, and we've recently been provided with some additional agri-marketing funds to promote Canadian beef, not only within Japan, but in all of the Indo-Pacific region, that helps that trade diversification. It's so critical because it really, that diversification adds value to Canadian beef that wouldn't otherwise accrue.
Pourriez-vous nous faire un petit portrait aussi de...
Could you also paint us a picture of what is mostly exported right now? So what cuts of beef are the most popular in Japan? And which provinces do those come from as well? Because each province has its own expertise and way of doing things.
Yeah, absolutely. So in particular, Japan is very competitive on chuck rolls and short plate, and those are very popular in local Japanese restaurants. Yakinaku, a hot pot type of preparation, and another kind of uniquely Japanese thinly sliced beef prepared option, and what's critical about that is that they are willing to pay more So it really sends that market signal back to Canadian farmers to say, we can, produce more than enough for the domestic marketplace and add value, in sending the cuts that are not as popular. Like those short plates are not in high demand here in Canada, but yet they add significant value to the beef carcass because they bring a premium in Japan.
20 seconds remaining.
Donc, j'en comprends qu'il y a ces producteurs.
So I'm understanding that there are producers with expertise that export. For example, you're talking about very finely cut sliced beef, where the Japanese consume that more than Canadians do. What about Wagyu beef that is exported here? I would imagine that that doesn't have local competition in Canada.
Yeah, I'll be brief. There is competition for Wagyu beef in Canada. There is local production here in Canada, right across the country. And to address the earlier question, there's beef that moves from Ontario, Manitoba, Alberta, right across the country to Japan.
Very much. On to Mr. McKenzie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Fulton, just sort of picking up on the questions of my colleague, it seems to me that the trade relationship for beef products into Japan is an excellent, mutually beneficial relationship. And I just wonder if you can contrast that with what we face should we drop tariff barriers and enter into a freer trade relationship with Mercosur.
Yeah, the contrast is stark. We're very concerned with the signals that we're getting from the government with regard to the Mercosur negotiations. Quite simply, it is a completely different product. It is of lower quality, of lower standard on the labor side, on the environmental side, on the food safety side, and quite simply represents a disease risk that we haven't quantified yet. And so, to make it, to boil it right down, we don't see an opportunity in that market for our beef because of the demand locally in those South American countries is not for that high quality grain-fed beef that Canada is so known for. So it's not a reciprocal opportunity and represents significant risks.
Thank you very much. Ms. Young, you mentioned something of great interest to me in respect of the Roberts Bank Port 2, or the expansion there. And that was the agreement and the support from coastal First Nations communities. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. This is a game-changing project. Again, just to situate it again, this is building new industrial land when we're running out of that in Canada, and in particular on the West Coast for trade enabling purposes. This was a project that went through a over 10-year environmental assessment review process, extensive consultations with First Nations that's resulted in achieving the consent of 27 with mutual benefit agreements in place. This is absolutely game-changing. We're at a point where we want to move to a final investment decision. We want to move to early construction works. With the right support from the Major Projects Office, we can get it across the finish line, and that's where we want to go.
Ms. Young, I represent an Alberta riding, and one of the things that we do a lot of in Alberta is produce energy, in particular crude oil. Our Prime Minister has stated that the MOU between the Government of Canada and the Government of Alberta will build a pipeline. So no location has been identified. But it would strike me if the Indigenous communities that are affected by that port development were approached, properly consulted, and respectful partnerships were entered into, we could expect the same thing for a pipeline project.
At this time, Roberts Bank Terminal 2 is moving ahead as permitted as a container, as a three-berth container terminal, given we are going to be looking at running out of container capacity here in the next few years. Certainly, there's a broader conversation about how we look at optimizing our energy exports. What we're really focused on right now is, I mentioned it briefly earlier, the dredging works under the Second Narrows Bridge. Really interesting. This is a slight narrowing that's going to allow the tankers leaving TMX's Westridge terminal fully laden instead of at 70% capacity. This isn't about more ships. It's actually about just optimizing capacity. It's a really great project, the right project for the right time.
And thank you for making that point. I did want to ask about that specifically, the Westridge capacity limitation due to the draft limits for crude oil carriers leaving there. Where does the Port of Vancouver stand in terms of additional capacity, particularly for crude oil carriers?
We're an independent agency of government. We know that federal government is looking at all kinds of options, and we will be a partner in exploring what that looks like as the conversation continues.
Do you have an ability, though, to say that there is physical room in the schedule in those narrow waters for additional tanker capacity coming from Westridge?
First step, let's get the Second Narrows dredged to make sure that we're maximizing that capacity, and then let's keep looking at options.
And do you understand there's a timeline in place for that dredging? Is it fully permitted and scheduled, or is it still in process?
It's currently undergoing a Fisheries Act authorization, and consultation is taking place on that. We know that it's all hands on deck in terms of making sure that proceeds on time, and we're looking forward to again getting that across the finish line.
Just coming back to...
Thank you very much, Mr. McKenzie. I'm
thank
sorry,
you, Madam Chair.
like you're 17 seconds over. All right, Madame Lapointe, please, for 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Welcome to our witnesses. Hello again, Mr. Fulton. I have a question for you. Earlier, you mentioned that the CPTPP is the gold standard. Since it was put in place in 2018, because earlier you mentioned that you have been exporting to Japan for 30 years, but has the CPTPP given you a boost, an extra boost? How and why?
Unequivocally, yes. What it's done is made us more competitive in that market. Without the tariff rate reductions that CPTPP brought, we wouldn't have been able to compete with, arguably the Americans and the Australians on that level playing field. And for a brief time, we had preferred access. And so what we want is a level playing field in order to let our product, our high quality beef product, shine.
Merci. J'ai une question.
Thank you. I have a question for you, Ms. Young. Earlier you said we could double exports and that we have to optimize efficiency at the port. You mentioned technology. Do you already know how you can achieve this to increase your capacity?
On vous entend pas.
We can't hear you.
Yourself, please.
Sorry about that. Great question. One of the key initiatives the Port of Vancouver and our supply chain partners, terminals, railways, et cetera, have undertaken over the last couple of years is an active vessel traffic management system. So this is using new digital tools and techs to give you the ability to have visibility into all of the above's data and to share that data. So there's real-time visibility in terms of traffic flows, of weather patterns, of currents, so that you can better schedule when a train arrives to pick up a product, put it on the ship. And that's in itself resulting in huge dividends in terms of the amount of volume that's able to move, including, for example, over the Second Narrows Bridge, the train track there, where CN has actually been able to increase their volumes by 10% in 1 year.
Merci. Intéressant.
Thank you. That's interesting. Earlier, my colleague asked you a question regarding your capacity. Of course, there's more exports coming from Western provinces in Canada, and you said that our structure is such that trade moves north-south more than west-east. What do you think could be done so that Quebec businesses can also export in the CPTPP framework to Japan? How could we make improvements there?
A Team Canada approach. So looking at the opportunity from not just a port perspective, but full supply chain perspective. What does that look like from especially a rail capacity perspective? Again, it is very competitive to ship out of Vancouver. It is to Japan. It's the shortest route, so it takes 9 to 13 days port to port. So from a Japan opportunity perspective, certainly the Port of Vancouver is going to play an outsized role.
Merci. Monsieur Fulton.
Thank you. Mr. Fulton, I have another question for you, so don't worry. You mentioned that we have been exporting for 30 years to Japan, mainly beef. Is it still possible to increase significantly to that same market?
Yes, absolutely. There is an opportunity right now in particular because of the strong market signals that all beef farmers are getting across Canada. There's an opportunity for our industry to lead agriculture in growth and investment. There is obviously a lot of global uncertainty that has making all industry a little bit more hesitant to make those investments. But quite simply, the opportunity that we have today is unlike anything we've seen in 40 years. And so we're already seeing a growth in the beef herd responding. In fact, replacement heifers are up 5% compared to last year. So that's a very good leading indicator that we are responding to the market signals to grow.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Fulton. On to Ms. Ursula Tremblay for 2.5 minutes, please.
Oui, alors écoutez, là, j'irai sans...
So I think I will ask a question to Ms. Young. So there is a significant increase in exports between ports. So in 2025 compared to 2024, a 12% increase. That is a significant increase. And Japan is the second largest export country destination for Canada, 9 million tons of goods. So if this increase continues, and we've heard how good the CPTPP is, so if this capacity increases, is the port able to support that? That's another great question.
The track record investments that have gotten us to where we've gone today to, again, and you just said it, record cargo volumes again last year, 170 million metric tons, again, 12% increase in exports across grain, potash, oil, and other commodities. Looking ahead, of course, if we're looking to double exports, we're going to need to build more, we're going to need to invest more, we're going to need to optimize more, and we're going to have to address some of those broader systemic challenges that are sometimes telling customers that we might not be as open for business as we'd like to, including things like addressing labor disruptions by responding to the recommendations of the Industrial Inquiry Commission on West Coast ports that have tabled their recommendations to government. So there's a whole bucket of things that absolutely we've come a long way, but if we're going to have this big, bold target, there's much more to do.
Yes, because trade with Japan depends on ports and also rail networks, of course. So today, what is the main limit outside of the port itself? Is everything going well when we look at customs, labor, rail transport? Are there still major challenges?
Is really strong. There's lots of good partnerships happening across the supply chain. We're just one cog in the wheel that keeps trade humming and our economy flowing. That being said, again, we're going to have to work in partnership to look at all kinds of opportunities, including to increase rail capacity. We know that the trade Diversification Corridors Fund is going to be really critical to that through Transport Canada, looking at what are the types of projects that are going to be required, including on the West Coast, to help Canada meet this moment. And that
thank you
includes...
very much, Ms. Young. Ms. Konaz, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you. My first question is for Mr. Fulton. As an MP who represents many ranchers in the Similkameen, South Okanagan, West Kootenay, I agree with the intention of the study because I want to see more Pacific beef exports, and so do my ranchers. In fact, they'd like more markets in general, of course. And so we'd like to focus on more Asian markets, but obviously this market comes under a lot of competition from Australian beef, New Zealand, American beef. If Canadian beef producers want to keep and eventually grow our foothold in the Japanese market and in Asian markets, what are the chief barriers that you see that that is limiting Canada from bolstering this export market?
That's a great question. I really appreciate it. I think it's a really good opportunity for me to kind of relay the current environment, the current landscape. We are seeing just in the last year a surge in demand for Canadian-specific, Canadian origin beef. There's very similar quality attributes between U.S. grain-fed beef and Canadian. But yet buyers in Mexico and South Korea, for example, are specifically choosing Canadian beef over our American counterparts, in part because of the disruption and the global uncertainty that surrounds trade with the U.S. And so to relate it back to your question, the opportunity is really about conveying and facilitating the volume of flow that the demand actually calls for. I can't speak specifically about whether or not the same effect is happening in Japan, but quite simply, previously, the U.S. was so large and the industry was so large with multiple plants, they could pull from several different plants and it still be of U.S. origin. And so buyers in Japan and those countries would choose to deal with those plants and those sellers because they had greater flexibility to ensure that they could get the product exactly on the spec that they needed. And now we're seeing the opposite. We're actually seeing a focus on Canadian beef being pulled into those markets because of the uncertainty.
That sounds that's really good news. And as you know, you've been I know to my area of the world, and you know that we have 6 border crossings with the United States. So even though we need to open up these markets, it's extremely important that we continue to trade with the United States. In fact, we need to trade with the United States. But what is and you understand also the difficulties with transportation, getting products to market. So what is the level of investment needed in terms of rail capacity or port freezer storage for meat exports in Western Canada?
Yeah, unequivocally, I think you bring up a really critical point that I have not mentioned earlier, and that the critical nature of the trading relationship between the U.S. and Canada. Broadly, the beef industry exports about half of its total production, whether it be in live cattle or beef, and 70% of that is destined for the U.S. currently. We can't diversify our way out of that, nor should we want to. The market signals are pulling Canadian beef products in for that. But critical to that is addressing the infrastructure bottlenecks that we see. I would say most significantly, it's those border crossings that relate to, for example, CFIA vets allowing or having enough capacity and hours to not be a constraint in bringing, for example, U.S. Feeder cattle into southern Alberta, for example. There is several different constraints on the border crossing that we need to address.
Information. Thank you for bringing that forward.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, right down to zero. Okay, Mr. Yasser Navi, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I want to thank all the colleagues for a very thoughtful conversation, discussion today, and thank the witnesses for being here. Mr. Fulton, we miss you being here in person. Always good to see you, and welcome, Ms. Young. I want to sort of focus a little bit moving forward as to what the future looks like, and get your thoughts on if you had sort of a wish list as to what you like to see when it comes to trade between Canada and Japan. Both the Minister of International Trade, Minister Sidhu, and Minister of Defense, Minister McGuinty, are co-leading a trade mission, as you probably know, to Japan in later part of June 23rd to 26th, I believe. And they'll be focusing on defense and security as a sector, of course, information and communication technologies, including AI, clean technologies, and energy transition. Agriculture and agri-food is a big part of this trade mission, including fish and seafood, and of course forestry and forest products. And I know we've got representative from that sector coming to this committee as well. From your perspective, what kind of this trade mission to a country like Japan, which has been a very important trading partner for us, means, and what would you like to see government focusing on as it relates to trade with a country like Japan? Maybe we can start with Ms. Young first, and then to Mr. Fulton.
Absolutely. I love this question. Minister City is doing a great job traveling the world, telling the world that Canada is open for business. Next mission to Japan, what I'd like to see, perfect world, is the minister standing on stage to say, here are the milestones that are going to get you more of the products that you want and need from Canada. Roberts Bank Terminal 2 has the support from government, and it's moving forward to a final investment decision. We have successfully moved forward on the second narrows dredging, which will open the doors to more energy products shipping to Japan. We have heard you on the labor disruptions that are making you uncertain about us being a trusted trading partner. Those are the types of things that having the minister stand on stage as he continues to build these relationships is critical to saying we are open for business and we're taking action.
Mr. Fulton?
Yeah, great question. As a matter of fact, I spoke with Minister Sidhu yesterday, and we talked about the planned trade mission with a focus on agri-food. Quite simply, what I relayed to him was the opportunity our opportunity that needs to be seized today. It is unique in this geopolitical landscape that there is a shift and a desire for Canadian origin product. And so to address that, these trade missions are critical. It raises the profile, and even some investment in, like I said, agri-marketing to really raise our presence in those local markets at this specific time. It really is an exciting time to build market share.
Thank you very much. Mr. Fulton, in terms of building that market, and again, you're looking at Japan, you're looking at Indo-Pacific, more broadly speaking, we're working towards negotiating an agreement with ASEAN. You were involved in the conversation we were having as vis-a-vis Indonesia as well. Speak to me from a market, from your product, from beef, perspective, and maybe agri-food in general, what kind of diversification that we should be focusing on that is not yet an opportunity we have not yet explored when it comes to Japan and broader sort of Indo-Pacific region?
A brief answer, Mr. Fulton.
There's the analogy is this: instead of using different components to build a car, we're doing the exact opposite. We're taking a beef carcass and removing and creating all of these different products. So we have 200 different products that can go to 200 different countries, and will optimize the value of the aggregate carcass. So I can't stress enough the opportunity in all of those unique local markets where they demand a specific little difference in the product, and it's Canada Beef's opportunity to seize.
Thank you very much. Exciting answers, and very much appreciate you being with us today. We will suspend for a moment while we get our other witnesses up for the next panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Witnesses and to our committee members. From the Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada, we have Jeff Nankerville, President and Chief Executive Officer. From the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, we have Matthew Holmes, Executive Vice President, International and Chief Public Policy. And Forest Products Association of Canada, Derek Niebuhr, President and Chief Executive Officer. Thank you very much for finding the time to come and speak to the committee again today. We will start with opening remarks of up to 5 minutes. Mr. Nankerville, please, the floor is for you.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to appear today. My main theme today will be that Canada-Japan trade relations are no longer best understood as a traditional export relationship. They're now shifting to a strategic economic partnership shaped by economic security, supply chain resilience, and advanced industries. And this is a topic on which we at the Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada have increased our focus recently through our combination of in-house expertise, external research fellows, and partner institutions, and our convening of events such as our annual Canada and Asia Conference in Singapore. And just yesterday on our website, we published a new research dispatch making the case for Japan-Canada cooperation on semiconductors and supply chains. Japan matters for Canada not only because it is a major sophisticated market, it has been that for a long time already, but today because it is a key Indo-Pacific partner at a time when reliable access to markets, trusted supply chains, and rules-based trade are under unprecedented pressure. So the opportunity is not simply to sell more to Japan, it's for Canadian businesses to become more deeply embedded in Japanese and allied value chains. Accordingly, Japan should be understood as a partner in Canada's economic resilience. That means aligning our commercial relationship with sectors where both countries have strategic interests: critical minerals and batteries, artificial intelligence, quantum technologies, semiconductors, new materials, clean technologies, and advanced manufacturing, all the while continuing in areas of strength such as life sciences, aerospace, energy, agri-food, and food security. But the most important point is that Canada should not be content to remain only a supplier of raw materials. In critical minerals and batteries, the greater opportunity lies in processing, refining, recycling, battery materials, and related supply chain activity. In advanced technologies, the opportunity is not only research collaboration, but commercialization, standard setting, and industrial partnerships. Across these sectors, Canada should position itself as a trusted industrial and innovation partner, not only as an exporter. And the CPTPP gives Canada and Japan a strong rules-based platform for this work, as you have been hearing. It has lowered tariff barriers and strengthened the framework within which Canadian firms can pursue opportunities in Japan. But formal access to a market is not the same thing as commercial success in that market. Japan is open, but it's also very stringent. Canadian companies continue to face non-tariff and business barriers, including Japan-specific standards, certification requirements, language and labeling requirements, layered distribution networks, high consumer expectations, and a relationship-based business culture. These are not reasons to avoid the market. They're reasons to approach it with patience, preparation, local partnerships, and long-term commitment. If we want our firms, especially small and medium-sized firms, to succeed in Japan, we must support them with market intelligence, help them to navigate standards and certification, and help them with introductions to credible local partners. Canada's Indo-Pacific strategy recognizes that trade, investment, innovation, and security are now closely connected. In the Canada-Japan context of today, that means encouraging Japanese investment in Canadian critical minerals, energy, batteries, clean tech, and advanced manufacturing. It also means supporting joint research and development, commercialization partnerships, and stronger links among firms, universities, provinces, territories, Indigenous partners, and Japanese industrial actors. The recently signed joint statement on comprehensive strategic partnership, with its practically focused roadmap, is an important step in this direction. And subnational and Indigenous partnerships deserve particular attention. Many assets relevant to Japan's economic security are rooted in specific regions and communities. Building durable Canada-Japan value chains will require federal policy, provincial capacity, Indigenous partnership, and private capital to work together. CPTPP has opened doors at a time when Japan itself is actively looking to diversify its relationships. So the task now is to help Canadian firms to walk through those doors and to find a place inside. In practical terms, that means focusing on three things. First, targeting cooperation in sectors where Japan's strategic priorities and Canada's comparative advantages overlap. Second, making Canada a more attractive destination for trusted Japanese investment and co-investment. And third, ensuring that Canadian businesses receive practical support to navigate Japan's demanding but rewarding market. If we get this right, Canada will capture more value, strengthen our supply chains and our overall resilience, support Canadian firms and workers, and deepen one of our most important Indo-Pacific partnerships. Thank you for the opportunity to contribute to the committee's deliberations. Je suis impatient de répondre à vos questions.
I look forward to answering your questions in either official language. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Holmes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Bon après-midi.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for the opportunity to appear today on behalf of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. Our network represents more than 400 local, provincial, and territorial chambers of commerce and boards of trade across the country, and over 120 trade associations in every sector of the economy. Along with our corporate members, this broad network represents over 200,000 businesses of all sizes in Canada. We strongly support efforts to deepen trade ties with Japan, one of our most important economic partners and a trusted ally in the Indo-Pacific. Japan remains the world's fourth largest economy, Canada's fourth largest foreign direct investor, and accounts for $40 billion in trade, approximately. Those numbers are important, but the strategic case is even stronger. In March, Prime Minister Carney and Prime Minister Takashi elevated the relationship with a new comprehensive strategic partnership focused on defense, energy, critical minerals, trade, and technology. That reflects a simple reality. In a more uncertain world, Canada and Japan are natural partners. It's not well known that Canada's relationship with Japan is one of our oldest. Only 4 years after the last spike completed the Transcontinental Railway, Japan's first consulate opened in Vancouver in 1889. The official Ottawa consulate followed in 1928 and ours in Tokyo in 1929, only our third with a non-Commonwealth country after the US and France. Our business communities are also deeply connected, including through the Japan-Canada Chambers Council, I'll refer to as the JCCC, launched in 2014 as a partnership between the Canadian Chamber of Commerce and the Japan Chamber of Commerce and Industry. The JCCC serves as an annual exchange to strengthen business ties, share knowledge, and advance policies between our two countries. Last February, we hosted a JCCC delegation in Ottawa, and we look forward to returning to Japan this September for the 2026 meeting to continue our business-to-business exchange focused on economic security, resilient supply chains, energy security, advanced technology, food security, and defense. You'll have heard the word security a few times there. The Canadian Chamber of Commerce will also be participating in the Team Canada Trade Mission to Japan at the end of June, as we recently did in Korea and Mexico, supporting Minister Sidhu's efforts to diversify and strengthen Canada's trade relationships with reliable partners. Beyond the bilateral relationship, Japan is a key rule of law ally at important multilateral tables such as the G7 and G20, and of course we've been discussing as well this morning the CPTPP. As Canada's official business engagement group at the G7 and G20 tables, last year the Canadian Chamber of Commerce hosted the Business 7 or B7 summit in Ottawa, which included a delegation from Keidanren, Japan's business federation. We also held similar side meetings in Johannesburg last fall on the edge of the B20 meeting. From these exchanges, the business priorities are clear. In the 2025 B7 communique, business leaders called for coordinated measures to stabilize critical minerals markets and unlock investment, including strategic reserves, tax incentives, and financing tools to expand capacity among trusted partners. On supply chains, we recommended a G7 mechanism to coordinate responses to shocks and choke points, map high-risk dependencies, and support production of strategically critical goods. Unfortunately, 1 year later, we are living through this risk in real time. The new comprehensive strategic partnership provides a strong roadmap for further collaboration. including modernizing the Joint Economic Committee to reflect emerging priorities such as critical minerals, advanced manufacturing, energy security, and new technologies. This also points to concrete industrial opportunities. For example, Canada and Japan have agreed to build, as you've heard, on existing cooperation on battery supply chains and industrial science and technology, while continuing support for Japanese automotive manufacturers investing in Canada as a key point of entry to the North American marketplace. When I had the opportunity to visit the 2025 Osaka World Expo last fall, I was reminded that with the Pacific, although the distance between our countries is great, we are in fact neighbors. As a key entry point for Canada within our broader Indo-Pacific strategy, Japan remains one of our most trusted and strategically important partners in the region and globally. In closing, it is the Canadian Chamber's view that deeper ties with Japan are firmly in Canada's national interest and consistent with our goals of trade diversification within a rules-based order. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Holmes. On Mr. Neighbour, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the committee for the invitation today and the opportunity to discuss the status of and a future look at the Canadian forest sector's trade with Japan. I appreciate the opportunity to share the time with my colleagues, and a shout out to our colleagues at the Chamber. We're a proud Chamber member and appreciate the work that they do to facilitate a number of these trade missions. I'd also like to recognize the work of the Canada Wood Group, which is our sector's and a partner group of FPACs that leads our export market diversification work. As the son and the grandson of Ottawa Valley pulp and paper workers, and as the son-in-law of a former stationary engineer at the pulp mill in Smooth Rock Falls, Ontario, I'm really proud to work with our team to bring the voice of our sector and its employees and communities across its large value chain, from producers of lumber to panels, engineered wood, pulp and paper, and bioenergy. It's an industry in Canada that creates nearly $90 billion a year in economic activity, with $37 billion in annual exports, putting it in the top 4 of Canada's exporting industries. Our current shipments to Japan are in the $1 billion range. In the face of combined softwood lumber duties and Section 232 tariffs currently in the 45% range, our sector's priority continues to be elimination of Section 232 tariffs and future risks thereof, and getting to a durable deal on softwood. At the same time, we're leaning into the domestic market opportunity for more wood use here at home and to export market diversification. There are opportunities, but they are incremental relative to the nearly $8 billion in annual softwood lumber shipments to the United States. We've been trading in Japan for 100 years in forestry, in Canadian forestry. The Canada Wood Group has been in place for 50 years, and over that time, it's taken us that much time to get to $1 billion in business. It's a heavy lift, and I'm happy to talk about some of the details in a bit. These are our priorities in Japan: defend and grow lumber share. And let's remember, Japan is not a natural build with wood culture. So Canada's played a leading role in introducing and accelerating the wood building culture into Japan. Our dimension lumber now holds 65% of Japan's 2x4 market, and continued technical engagement on Japanese market standards and the platform frame system is needed to hold and grow that share. On mass timber and advanced wood building systems, what Canada can bring aligns with Japan's housing renewal, decarbonization, and seismic resilience priorities, and builds on Canada's federal provincial reconstruction support after the 2011 Tohoku earthquake. And then in the forest bioeconomy, we see an opportunity in biocarbon, biofuels, biomass that are also emerging Japanese priorities in that decarbonization space. A few barriers to note: shrinking Japanese market with growing Japanese supply. Housing starts are declining with the aging Japanese demographics, and Japanese graded lumber is actually gaining share in the 2x4 segment. Europe and other competitors are scaling up. We're seeing aggressive market entry across lumber, pulp, and pellets from the EU into Japan. We're seeing a tightening of standards and sustainability requirements. New Japanese sustainability and traceability rules require sustained technical engagement. So it's not just about selling more wood to Japan. We got to get in there. We got to work on the codes and the systems. We got to develop the market, and then we got to demonstrate. So it's really a three-step process. And then supply side pressure here at home in terms of declining allowable cut, federal provincial regulatory duplication, and rail and port reliability, and the costs of the rail system in Canada. So our asks and offers to meet the moment include a dedicated multi-year funding for the Canada Wood Group to build on its successes in export development, to double the funding of NRCan's Global Forest Leadership Program, to collaborate on investment in market entry support, spec alignment tools, testing labs, distributor networks in Japan. There's also those opportunities in Korea as well, and the continued trade missions to Japan. We just had one with the BC and Alberta governments back in November, specific to forestry. So a bit of a profile about us, our opportunities, and I thank you for your time and look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. McKenzie, please, for 6 minutes.
Madam Chair, if I could, I'll defer to my colleague just to initiate, and we'll split time.
Mr. Niebuhr, we are more than a decade without a softwood lumber agreement. It's important to diversify. I think we all agree. But in my riding, Similkameen, South Okanagan, West Kootenay, I've already seen shift changes and job losses. So if we're looking to, in my riding has 6 border crossings to the United States. That's vital for historic U.S. trade. We depend on it. So if we're looking to hurry on trade with Japan and other Asian markets, what's the pace we need to move? How many mills do you expect might not be able to hang on for another year, another 2 years, 3 years? Please don't sugarcoat it.
Thanks for the question, and I'm going to be in Castlegar in a few weeks. I'll look forward to chatting you about that and getting to visit our Kalistnikov and Intrafor and Mercer, which are important. It's an important hub for us in that part of BC. So a couple of things. Softwood lumber duties and the Section 232 tariffs are right now at a pretty high point at a combined 45%. We don't want to rush to a bad deal, but we do need to move to some certainty. And I'd say the Section 232 tariffs, which can be increased or whatnot at the stroke of the president's pen, continues to be quite a wild card, I would say. You know, the softwood lumber dispute does have a process. As painful as it is, the Section 232 piece is a little bit more unpredictable. I think we got a couple of issues specific to BC. We have a lot of challenges on provincial permitting. That is, and as I travel the country, that's very unique to British Columbia. The industry is challenged across the country, but there are some unique issues in terms of legacy fire and pine beetle impacts in BC, as well as provincial regulation. Our hope is that liquidity supports will continue to flow to support mills to keep running. We've lost a few thousand jobs. I've been impressed with the resilience of the industry broadly, but as this drags out, that risk gets greater. And
Thank
the employee supports
I have to interrupt
well.
you. I'm sorry. It sounds like this is a dire situation, but I need to hand over my time to my colleague here. But we will. I'll be looking forward to speaking with you more about this.
For sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nankivell. I wanted to ask you about specifically things that we can do domestically to support our trade opportunities abroad. Each of you has mentioned, in one degree or another, words like security, reliability. Obviously, global events have put tremendous focus on that. But in order for Canada to be a good partner to our trading partners, and specifically with Japan, what type of things do we have to work on domestically?
It's an excellent question, Madam Chair. It's really central to the task ahead of us. I think on the Japan side, and you know, from our contacts with various partners and working with the business communities on both sides, Japan is looking for, on the one hand, reliability of supply, and we all have work to do on that. And we heard from the port in the earlier session. You know, there's physical infrastructure constraints that need to be addressed urgently for us to meet our objectives with regard to the trade in physical goods. When it comes to investment, which is an essential part of the potential gains that we have with Japan, we need to really move again with urgency to create the conditions where Japanese investors who have deep pockets and have an appetite for resources, particularly in areas like critical minerals, that are geostrategically important. They're ready to move forward, but we need to assure them that they will have the conditions to do that. And they have had the experience. They have seen Japanese companies like Mitsubishi playing a leading role in LNG Canada. I'm happy to say that's now a success story, but it was a long road to get to where we are today. And so I think this comes to the general question of what we need to do to make the overall investment environment for major projects much more appealing and present ourselves as a reliable partner. And I should say at the same time, when the Japanese business leaders look at Canada, they are concerned about our access to the U.S. market, so that remains something that is high in their decision-making, what's going to happen with our access to the U.S. market, and the ambassador of Japan has made that quite clear. But at the same time, they also look at what's happening in the U.S., and privately, they tell us that they are interested in potentially shifting some things from the U.S. to Canada, because of our reliability and predictability, and they look at the long term. So the more we can present ourselves as that reliable, stable partner and be seen to be working on the issues that are of greatest importance to them, the sooner we'll be able to unlock those investments.
Thank you. You have 22 seconds remaining.
If you have any information respecting crude oil imports to Japan, I have a figure of $80 billion in 2023, but 95% of that from the Gulf states in the world. Do we have an opportunity there for crude oil exports to Japan?
A brief answer, please. Yes. Good. That's a
Thank
good
you.
answer. Mr. Lavoie, please, for 6 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to our witnesses for being here today. You were saying that you are convinced that we must increase our trade with Japan. I have a question for you, Mr. Nankivel, and for you as well. Either of you can answer. So I would like a very quick question. In your opinion, do we have enough trade representatives in Japan and enough of their counterparts here in Canada, because we want to include new businesses, we want to break into new sectors? Do we have enough representatives currently? In my opinion, I would say that would be very desirable to establish consulates, or reestablish consulates rather, in Japan outside of Tokyo, because it's a rather small country, and regions also have opportunities to offer for Canadians. And we need to develop relations, long-term relationships, and get used to their culture and so forth. And the more representatives that we have elsewhere in the country of Japan, the better chance we will have of succeeding.
Eux font la même chose.
And do you think they are doing the same? Are they increasing the number of representatives? Yes. I'll have to answer in English.
So we do have, relatively speaking, we have approximately 40 trade commissioners situated in Japan, so it's a pretty strong representative body. However, it is, again, a high market for us. There are provincial representatives as well, including the Délégation Générale since, I think, the 1970s from the province of Quebec. And so it is a strong market. We have historically had some consulate presence in other cities. That has retracted in recent years to a certain degree. I think there is, as we build this relationship, and relationships, as Mr. Nankivel has described, are incredibly important to the business relationship over the long term. It's important that we show up, but also that we continue to be there, and we have good representation there on the ground.
Est-ce que le Japon a le potentiel de...
Does Japan have the potential of importing double what they're importing from Canada currently? We want to double our exports. Does Japan have the ability to increase that market share? Because, of course, it's all well and good to want to do it, but if the capacity is not there, it won't happen.
A first response. I mean, they have a very incredibly sophisticated logistics and shipping basis there. They have advanced manufacturers. They are also global traders in their own right, and so they are quite ready to import and export and also value add within the country of Japan. So yes, I would say quickly they do have the capacity and the interest to expand their trade. There are certain areas that have been described where we need to build into both their current supply chain, but also create maybe some more value chain relationships. We spoke of agri-food earlier. They're our third largest market for canola, for example, where they buy the raw commodity and they have a very advanced crushing facility that they sell to other world markets. So they buy the commodity and add the value there. But it's a very important relationship for our producers.
Rapidement, je vais le t'affiler. Je vous donne une...
Quickly, if I gave you a magic wand, Mr. Nakiville, and to Mr. Holmes as well, if I gave you a magic wand and I asked what would be one or two short-term actions that need to be done quickly to accelerate the growth of trade, are there things that could be done quickly? And then after, perhaps you could speak to medium and long term. What would you do if you had the choice?
C'est peut-être pas la réponse la plus...
It's perhaps not the most interesting answer, but it's a matter of accelerating things that already exist. For example, the strategic partnership. There are practical measures associated with that, and they need to be followed up on. All of that requires time. It requires travel by deputy ministers, associate deputy ministers, provincial representatives, and other players such as the Canadian Chamber of Commerce in order to complete those follow-ups and to show that this time we really are serious about doing this in the long term. Mr. Holmes, very quickly. Yes, quickly.
Extremely exposed. They were reliant on Russian energy before the Ukraine war, and so we have a real opportunity. Our LNG exports out of the West have already found a willing audience. More medium term, I will, in my conversations with some of the Japanese big houses, they're absolutely confused by our jurisdictional chaos in Canada and internal barriers to trade. They don't understand why we can't get out of our own way, so we need to deal with that. And then long term, our relationship with the U.S. and our CUSMA arrangement is very important to the investors.
Thank you very much, Mr. Holmes. Priceless comments. Mr. Savard-Tremblay for 6 minutes, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Merci à vous.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to you for being here and for your presentations. My first question will go, and I'll just pick on the fly. I think it's for Mr. Nakivelle and Mr. Holmes, probably. And then I'll come back to lumber because Quebec is also a major producer. And I know BC is a major player as well, but we'll come back to that. So in your perspectives, we have a lot of fishers in Quebec. It's an important fishery. And we know that the Japanese are a major consumer. And also, when it comes to China, there's overfishing. These gigantic boats are being used for fishery. So the Japanese, where does the fish come from that they consume? Would we have an opportunity, is what I'm asking? In the first panel, we were also talking about beef opportunities.
Food in particular, it's an incredible staple and a rich tradition within Japanese culinary culture, of course, but more broadly within the Indo-Pacific and Asia more generally. So there are products that Canada is a major exporter of that we don't consume, and most Canadians would find abhorrent, quite frankly. Sea cucumber is my personal choice on that list. And we export an incredible amount of that to parts of Asia. This is also an interesting angle because our air transport is critical for this commodity in particular. If you think of lobsters, for example, those are often shipped by air. And so our domestic carriers having direct ties to Japan and to other key hubs in Asia are an important part of our export strategy.
Je pourrais juste ajouter que ça fait déjà.
I can just add that it's already a significant part of our trade in our exports. There are Canadian entities that have already been trading for quite some time and have been exporting seafood to Japan. However, to what extent? But there's always an opportunity to do more. To what extent is Japan hampered by China's behavior? Because China is overfishing, and this could penalize Japan in its capacity to fish. Well, I'm not an expert on that topic, Madam Chair, but procurement security is of the utmost importance to Japanese leaders. And it's important not to overlook the importance of that for the cabinet and for the Prime Minister. It is essential. The Japanese are always on the lookout for sources for things like fish and seafood, as my colleague mentioned. It's a large part of what they consume.
I may, Japan is committed to, I can't remember the exact terminology, but a free and open Indo-Pacific, and that's a maritime strategy. I think that geopolitically is important, not just for maritime travel and the supply of goods and global supply chains, but also important for fisheries and for the availability of other minerals. It's something that Canada would be quite committed to as well, and on multiple fronts, economically, socially, politically, and geopolitically, I think that's an important priority.
Merci.
Thank you. That's very illuminating. Now, Mr. Nybor, if I still do have time remaining, of course. So I brought this up quickly with you before asking my questions to your colleagues. So BC currently exports significantly to Japan. When it comes to Quebec, we export a lot to the United States, and we know all of the barriers around softwood lumber in that relationship. Do you think that there is an opportunity for Quebec lumber in trade with Japan?
The opportunities are more limited for Eastern Canada, including Quebec. I think where we see Quebec, there's a lot more opportunity domestically as we think about diversifying and finding new markets. More mid-rise construction in both Ontario and Quebec, I think, is a big opportunity for the domestic sectors. The UK housing strategy, looking across the Atlantic, is probably a better fit. So the diversification piece for us, if you're in Saskatchewan, you're landlocked. If you're in Ontario East, opportunities across the Atlantic, maybe in the Caribbean, Mexico, and then more to the Asia Pacific if you're west of the Ontario-Manitoba border.
So in 30 seconds, what else can we say? Look, you're saying that it would be more difficult, but why would it be more difficult for Eastern Canadian producers?
It's really the cost of shipping. It's just more expensive to move the product.
Ça se limite à ça, oui.
Yeah,
Thank you very much. Mr. Trumbull, would you please come and take the chair for the remaining 20 minutes of the meeting? Okay.
Madam Chair. Sounds good. Je vais ici. OK. Oui. Je vais juste attendre d'avoir mon carton. Merci. Alors,
Thank you. So, Ms. Conant, you have 5 minutes. Cronus, sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You hear today, diversification has been the topic of the day. Can you share with us the important work that the Canada Wood Group does on the ground in Japan, and how maintaining that kind of in-market presence is important for Canada?
Yeah, thank you. And Harmac Pacific and the NIMO, one employee-owned mill, proudly employee-owned, and an important mill in our ecosystem. And I think there's a difference that the Canada Wood Group, the pulp sector, has a bit of an easier path in terms of its ability to tap into foreign markets. In wood, it is that involved process. So having the boots on the ground there, so that we can work with architects and engineers in Japan, work with governments and building code officials. It took us 20 years to get OSB or Orient Strand Board into Japan because it's the steps to get it operationalized and into the system. On seismic, a mid-ply wall systems took us 10 years. That's for seismic strength and whatnot. So we did have a reduction in funding. Our hope is that funding is going to be more than restored, and that will be critical because once you come out, you need to stay in and you need to continue to invest, in our case, for the long run.
You for that, and of course we are incredibly proud of Harmac in our community. Given the current challenges with the U.S. market, how much mitigation can Japan really provide, and how important is it for Canada and for Canadian lumber producers, for the people that are part of your association, for Canada to get a deal with the United States?
It's an important incremental opportunity. I don't want to give the illusion that it's $800 million a year on the lumber side versus $8 billion to the U.S. on the lumber side. But if we can get a few $100 million more to Japan, that's important as one of the many measures we're taking to try to minimize the risk. That said, because of the cost of shipping, the close proximity, there are natural relationships. And I think the other thing that's often not talked about is the quality of Canadian-grown wood. Because of our colder temperatures, our longer growing cycles, that brings about properties of wood that U.S. home builders want to frame homes with. They prefer to use spruce, pine, and fir over southern yellow pine. So there's a natural advantage in the marketplace right now. There's a natural advantage in the marketplace for Canada. The challenge is at 45%, we're still selling. The difference, I would say, between 06, 07, 08, 09, that downturn, markets absolutely collapsed then. Like housing starts were 600,000 in the U.S. They're at 1.3 million now. So it's just soft. It's been soft for 3 years. Tariffs and duties at 45%, ongoing uncertainty is just not good for our business.
And just before I turn back, do you get regular updates from the Canadian government on those negotiations? Like, do you have a good window into where we're headed?
Yeah, I think there are elements, of course, we're not going to be privy to, but in terms of asking what might work for you, those conversations have been ongoing, yes.
And just turning back to the Japanese relationship and our more global efforts at diversification, I understand that the Canada Wood Group has had its had its federal funding reduced over the last few years. How is that keeping pace with our competitors? Like our competitors, as we look towards diversification, are they investing more in these relationships, and how are we doing at keeping up?
Yeah, they are, and Japan is doing more domestically as well. So the threat is from inside the house in Japan. In terms of our competitive threats in the marketplace, we had pretty consistently from 2019 to 2023 funding between $5 and $8.7 million. In 23-24, that was cut to $4,000. But I think there's an admission now that was a mistake. But because of that reduction in 23-24, we had to lay off a bunch of staff, and we lost some time. That's why, Canada Wood Group is looking for $5 million at least over the next 3 years, which I don't think is exorbitant, because they actually need to scale back up.
And just in terms of as we move forward on this, if Canada does fail to act on this file, who stands to benefit from that, and how quickly could we lose market share around that, and also just getting into the mix and the changing relationship with China. Can you comment on how the Japanese feel about that?
20 secondes environ.
Oh, wait, okay.
About 20 seconds remaining.
Times the size of the market for us right now. We've lost a lot of market share in China because of Russian wood. They're now buying Russian wood. You know, Japan's different in that it's committed to high value, and that's where our opportunity is.
Alors, Monsieur Fonseca.
Mr. Fonseca, you have 5 minutes.
Chair, I know you know and the members know that I am a member of Parliament from Mississauga, and I'm going to make an unbiased yet bold statement here. And Mississauga is Canada's #1 hub for Japanese investment. Of the 250 largest Japanese companies right across Canada, over 100 are located in Mississauga. These would be companies like Canon, Panasonic, Fujitsu, Ricoh, Mitsubishi Logistics. So many, many companies. How this all started, I'll take you back 40 plus years. If you recall our great mayor, Hurricane Hazel McCallion. So the hurricane went to Japan, started a relationship. We have a sister city with Korea, Japan. That relationship grew into bringing many of these companies, some anchor companies, like I mentioned, like Canon and others followed. So, and that continued, that deep, deep relationship, people-to-people ties, and through Invest Mississauga, a number of trade missions. Now we've got the CPTPP. We just had the Prime Minister's visit to Japan in the strategic partnership that was mentioned. We have Minister Sidhu and Minister McGuinty going to Japan on a trade mission. So this opportunity, I want you to just paint a picture for us, Mr. Nankville. What does that mean, and what can that bring in terms of foreign direct investment? Like, I'll also let you know, we have a very ambitious goal of $1 trillion of foreign direct investment over the next 5 years. So how can this trade mission help in achieving that goal?
Well, it is. I mean, it's a great Canada-Japan. It's a great story to tell in the last half century, and I think honestly, the potential for the next half century is even brighter if you look at how our respective geopolitical situations have evolved. And so I think these kinds of visits, as I've mentioned, I think these kinds of visits are quite important. So the next one, you know, with Minister Sidhu, Minister McGuinty, and with a mission that will be focusing on these areas of high technology and defense industry potential collaboration. These are the right things to be doing. The trick, really, the challenge will be to do that in a sustained way. And then to be doing the work at home as we're doing that, as we're going, you know, often and consistently to Japan at a high level and inviting high-level visitors from Japan to Canada. And let's keep in mind the 100th anniversary of the bilateral diplomatic relationship is in 2028, and on the Japanese side, they're already very focused on this. I think we could, you know, we would be looking at some very high-level visitors from Japan. On the Canadian side, we should make the most of that, and to continue to build. But at the same time, we have to be doing that work at home on the investment climate, on getting a good outcome from the North American market negotiations that we have, and continuing to, you know, to build the facts on the ground to support the case for Canada as the preferred destination. But I'm gratified to see, I think, after the last year, that there's a realization among Canadians of the role that the Japanese auto companies, you know, two in particular, have played as, you know, by far the largest assemblers of vehicles in Canada. And I think that was not so much in the public consciousness, say 2 years ago, as it is today. So they're good corporate citizens, and we definitely would do well to get more of that.
Thank you for that, and I agree. And so I'll go to a friend, Derek Neighbor. We've known each other for many years. I didn't know about your history, just and your family's history in the forestry sector, but thank you for sharing that. I wanted to ask you about with Japan in terms of driving more Canadian demand for our products, more Japanese demand for our products. Where is the kind of the value add that we could bring that then take into the market? And how do you do that? Do you work with like local construction companies that are able to use our products and see the value in our products?
Yeah, exactly. And working with governments on MOUs where building codes are arranged, working with architects and engineers on the ground, working with them to teach staff and employees how to work with wood and how to build and use these new systems. In terms of the market opportunity, I think, we've got, like I said, a 100-year relationship in Japan. There's an opportunity to do more. Japan's an aging population. That presents opportunities in terms of retirement homes built with wood, non-residential warehouses. We were already seeing in North America, Amazon and Microsoft and Walmart turning to mass timber engineered wood to build non-residential commercial properties. So we see those same opportunities in Japan. And of course, Japan, given the earthquake risks, we have a lot of experience in Canada in that kind of design and engineering, and that's a big value add and a big way we can bring some Canadian know-how to support building in their market.
Merci, Monsieur Fonseca.
Thank you, Mr. Fonseca. So I have 2.5 minutes. So I think I'll ask Mr. Nankivel and Mr. Holmes a question. Why does service trade seem to be so much less developed between the two countries? Well, I am pleased to have the opportunity to mention trade of services, because that is indeed an area where we have opportunities now. There are limitations imposed by geography or also by physical infrastructure. And when we talk about doubling trade and significantly increasing our exports, it is also important to focus on services. And we see many opportunities. Japan is not a small country. It's not a small population either. And there is already demand in certain IT sectors for talent. And Canada is currently a source for that expertise in the world. So there are opportunities for us. And that is indeed part of the roadmap that was established during Prime Minister Carney's visit to Tokyo. It impacts sectors such as IT, quantum technologies, quantique in French, quantum technologies, so that is trade when it comes to the services sector. Mr. Holmes, if you'd be able to explain it to me in 10 seconds, that would be great.
I'll skip the history of the yen shock in the market, which encouraged a very controlled approach by the government to financial services. And the demographics of Japan have necessitated that they are investing in foreign markets and bringing capital back, and so that has also had a factor. But to Mr. Nankivel's point on AI and quantum in particular, there is a real Canadian opportunity there, and cybersecurity as well.
Merci. Alors, Monsieur Davis.
Thank you. You have 5 minutes.
My question is to Mr. Holmes. I'm going to pick up on what my colleague, Mr. McKenzie, was talking about at the end of his question. Japan is a massive importer of crude petroleum, having taken about $80.4 billion in 2023, and 94% of its imports came from 4 Persian Gulf states: Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, and the UAE. For obvious reasons, there's a gap in these imports, which I think can be filled by Canada. What do you think a new pipeline would mean to Canada's GDP if we opened up more capacity to the Pacific Rim?
Thank you for the question. I think you've heard from previous witnesses as well that there is a business case to be made here. We've seen that play out in real time with the LNG developments, not crude, I'll come back to that, but the LNG developments on the West Coast and Kitimat area in particular, and that, and also, of course, the Trans Mountain coming online. Ms. Young from the Vancouver port spoke compellingly of even seeing higher efficiency in the current export egress that we have for crude. I will say that the export of Brent crude from Canada to Japan would likely require, in some cases, some refinery adjustments on their side. That's a long-term adjustment and commitment they would need to make. And so there is a conversation to be had there around how the processing of our crude exports might be received by Japan. But the market potential is huge. They have been an ally at the G7 table. They stuck with us. They are surrounded by neighbors that are not necessarily looking after their interests or are quite volatile. And so there is a case for energy security.
Do you have any analysis, any projections on what that impact would have on our GDP?
Specifically to the GDP, I am a bit ahead of my skis here, but I would argue that between the gold commodity price that Canada's enjoyed over the last year, year and a half, and our current exports of energy, those are the two reasons why we are currently in the black.
So why do you think the traditional energy sector was excluded from the Canada-Japan Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, despite the fact that Japan is heavily reliant on other sources of energy?
I'll speak quickly, and I believe Mr. Nankivella would like to respond as well. So I think that there is a real focus in Japan right now around clean technology and clean tech opportunities, including hydrogen. There's a lot of interest domestically within that space. However, that does not preclude or exclude other energy options for Canada. I think we have a more mature industry there in Japan that could be developed. And so what I think the two governments are trying to do with this new agreement is to foster and encourage some of the emerging industries that they would like to see. So I think the attention's been put there for those reasons.
Briefly, because I have another question for you, Mr.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I would just add Japan, among the major economies, with the possible exception of China, Japan is really the most aggressive in trying to diversify its energy sources, and it's not all in one direction. It's kind of everything at once. And so their current situation is only leading them to see it as even more urgent that they reduce their demand for oil and move on to other things. And it's the whole panoply from including nuclear in the future and various forms of renewables. And they're probably the ones who are most interested in hydrogen in its variations.
I only have a few seconds left, but Mr. Nankivell, Assay Kasei is building a $1.7 billion EV battery ion separator plant in my riding. The project is now delayed because the market has softened and the project won't open on time. I'm interested in the relationship between Canada and Japan. It seems to me that Japanese investments are looking for a supply chain anchoring strategy. And what do you think the implications of that on the longer term is for CUSMA 3.0? If we actually get to CUSMA 3.0.
Yeah, I think those things are connected because there's another, geopolitics can exist in several dimensions at the same time. So while we have our issues with the U.S. bilaterally, we are part of a larger family of countries, of democracies who are working collectively and mainly through the G7, but with other partners, including Australia and South Korea, to build supply chains, new supply chains. And so there are areas and there are, multilateral agreements, countries including the U.S. and Japan and Canada together who are working on, various measures, advanced market, purchase commitments and things like this, floor prices, to build a new supply chain. So So that could play, that will be an element in how we develop our relationship with the U.S. will be how the U.S. and Canada play together with Japan, with South Korea, with the Europeans and others in this new alignment of supply chain. So it's very relevant, and that can be an asset for us if we play it well.
Merci, Monsieur Davies. Alors, pour le dernier tour de
Thank you,
questions.
Mr. Davies. And for the last question round of the day, Mr. Assassi, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you also to the three witnesses. You've been excellent. You're obviously on the front lines of deepening our relationship with Japan, and your remarks have been very informative. So if I could start off with Mr. Nankivil. As you know, Japan and Canada are both members of the CPTPP. That has been a success. There's no doubt about it. And we know that two-way trade has gone up 20%. However, are there aspects of that agreement that have really not lived up to expectations? Is there more that can be done with respect to certain sectors insofar as you're concerned?
I think when it comes to the agreement, the story is as you have been hearing from the industry side. There's just so much for us to do to exploit the opportunities that have been made possible by what's good in the agreement. That really there's more than enough work to be done there, and then it's really about having the supporting infrastructure, the government, the crown corporations, and industry associations, and so on, to be able to facilitate, Canadian companies, not just for exports, but also for strategic partnerships and co-investments in Canada and elsewhere, to be able to develop those relationships. So I think the focus should be on really following up on the openings that have been created by the agreement as it pertains to Japan-Canada relations, rather than trying to reopen certain parts of it.
Thank you. Now, in your remarks, you touched on a gathering that you have scheduled for Singapore. One of the things that seems to me that is very important is knitting together networks of business leaders, academics, people who can be very helpful in forging stronger ties between our two countries. The gathering in Singapore is a very novel approach. So if you could share with the committee what you have in mind and how impactful you think it will be.
I appreciate the question, so this is what we call the Canada and Asia Conference, Conférence Canada en Asie. We started it in 2023, originally as a partnership between Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada and Universities Canada. And we worked with the Canadian universities to invite their alumni from all across Asia, from India, South Asia, Southeast Asia, Japan, Korea, China, Australia, New Zealand, and so on, to an annual gathering where we bring together business leaders, government agencies, investment attraction agencies, the provincial and municipal government bodies from Canada, and their counterparts from Asia. And we've just done the fourth one this past February. It's anchored in Singapore, where we now have an office with support from the government of Canada. And the conference itself, we have 30 partners who are financial supporters of the conference across the private sector and public sector. And we get over 600 participants coming to this conference. 2/3 are people based in Asia. 1/3 are people who come out from Canada. So more than 200 this past year coming out from Canada, which is about the balance that we want. And over half of the attendees are people who work in the private sector or in organizations that directly support the private sector. And Japan is a part of this. It's not a Canada-Singapore conference. It's a Canada-Asia conference. And we have had corporate support from Japan and universities and other participants. We are working to grow that, and we are looking to do more of these sorts of activities in the region. and it's really catching fire, because when you bring our leading universities together, that's a big part of the Canadian brand, is the quality of our human capital and our leading researchers. We bring in the major research hubs, the innovation clusters and the incubators and accelerators and the whole venture ecosystem, and their counterparts from across Asia. And this is the kind of tissue that we need to build between Canada and Asia. These sorts of things happen organically, between Canada and the U.S., between Canada and Europe. This kind of fabric is underdeveloped, underwoven when it comes to Canada and Asia, and we firmly believe, and Japan is an excellent example of this, you need that supporting tissue in order to get the business deals. Asia's not a place where you can just go and say, here's my product, do you want to buy it or not, sign the contract. You have to build those relationships, and they have to develop comfort with you. And the reputation that we enjoy as Canadians in Asia, much of it due to the work of our leading Canadian companies, Manulife, Sun Life, the pension funds, and others, for over a century, the more we can expose decision makers in Asia and new audiences in Asia to that, the better we will be able to succeed in our economic and security and geopolitical goals. So we're continuing with that as the foundation. Yeah, and we look forward to doing it again next February.
Merci. Alors, merci à l'ensemble.
Thank you. Thank you to all of our witnesses. Thank you to all committee members and the support staff at the House of Commons for this meeting. May 5th is our next meeting. We'll be looking into internal trade within Canada. Then May 7th, we will meet next on Japan for the first hour. Then we will have a meeting following that with officials from Global Affairs Canada regarding the upcoming visit to Latin America. The meeting is adjourned.